a small question I would like to ask Mark and Jan to respond a bit on what Gudrun said, because he already mentioned you several times during her presentation. Well, I'm wondering what you think about it, so I'm wondering about that as well. So, but perhaps some others that have some questions on right now. Okay, then can I? Yeah.
Well, on the sophisticated software, Adrienne is a good friend.
I
may
also
be
know
able
her. She's from Switzerland. I know her.
Yeah, you might be able to lure her in. Yeah, there was one thing that I would like to discuss sometime. Your classification, way back in the slides, it's an odd mix compared to what Mark showed in the Millennium Ecosystem Assessment and what I do in the TEEP. And actually, the Commission is very much gung-ho, I think is the expression, on what is called CICES now. That's the international classification scheme, which is not 100% established and stamped, but that's what they like to see. So, and the differences are all marginal, but it's about consistency.
Yeah.
Maybe you can get that slide back one way or another. I saw two
Concept and terms, the one. This one.
One back, I think. Yeah.
This one.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a bit old, huh? It's from 2008.
Yeah, and I don't know if you want to work with this, but this has an odd mix of terms like one, ecological services, okay, it's now regulating and supporting, that we can live with. That biodiversity should not be in there as a service. You have to determine whether visible biodiversity is often an aspect that they link under cultural services, where people observe and enjoy and get the information. And biodiversity, again, then is a feature of the ecosystem which contributes to many of these functions. Emissions are not services. The food security, health and poverty and net income then should all be out of this. I mean, that's outside the services classification. So I just didn't know whether you were going to work with this. If so, then I would propose to spend an hour on reclassifying.
Yeah.
One word on CICES. CICES is presently sort of guarded by the EEA in Copenhagen. Roy Haynes was one of the main designers. It's controversial in the sense that it's very natural science-based. The terminology is very technical, so that's good in the sense that it's very explicit, unlike many of the terms used in TEEP and the MA. But it doesn't communicate at all. If you talk to stakeholders, the CICES will definitely not raise any enthusiasm.
Will the CICES have to clarify on this also?
It basically follows the function services distinction, but it's a 5-level deep classification system. So,
I looked at it.
yeah, provisioning services, and then it goes to 3 different groups, and then further and further until it's very technical. The reason they've done that, it's not just another classification, is that they want to use it for accounting. And these statisticians, accountants want definitions which are not overlapping. So that's what makes it immediately uncommunicable in a stakeholder workshop, but it does have its merits in science. And you have the possibility, because it's a consistent hierarchical classification, to take a level, like level 3, and map it at that level, or quantify it at that level, and break it down. So that, I mean, you should consider that also because Brussels is a bit leaning towards that, and if you're reporting to them, make sure that you use that.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything there, which is probably a bit of relief for you.
That's why we invited you, Mark.
That list is a mix of, you know, stuff and
You know
fun.
that list was done shortly after the
Yeah.
Millennium ecosystem, before teeth and everything.
Yeah, no worries. It's, you know, you've got to start somewhere, haven't we?
Yes.
But yeah, unpicking it, there is no such thing as a perfect model at the moment. I mean, the Millennium Assessment has its gaps. Arguably, some of the supporting services are functions, not services. The Millennium National Ecosystem Assessment UK misses stuff. You know, TEEB isn't perfect and CITES isn't perfect. But I tend to agree that, well, the EU certainly likes CITES. For various reasons, I prefer Millennium Assessment. But as long as you're covering things, the important thing is that you're not just selecting indicators of things you're sure about and ignoring the rest.
Yeah, no, exactly.
The absolutely essential thing is, even if you're unsure, have some flaky metric.
That's the guesswork, I guess.
Yeah, because otherwise it falls off the table. And as I sort of kept emphasising this morning, it's systems. And there's always a sort of a reach for certainty with these measures. But, you know, in the UK we've had record flooding followed by record drought, followed by another record flooding, and we're probably going to have a drought this summer. And that's a reality. So metrics that you can, you know, hang your hat on, as we'd say, over 3, 4, 5 years, just might not be feasible. It might not be doable. So we have to reflect that we can have a much higher level of uncertainty than we'd like. But the important thing is that we keep looking at the system and don't get narrowed down to just the things that we are more certain about. Because almost by definition, they're going to be things near a market, and therefore by definition, not transformational.
Don't fall in the neoclassical trap.
No.
No, I'm not afraid of that. But I noticed also in many papers people reduce the research on like 4 ecosystem services.
Yeah.
I always hated that.
That's cherry picking.
That's amazing.
You know, I mean, I got into big trouble when I worked for our environment agency for absolutely slating a piece of agency research that said we're doing a systems view, here are the important services.
Yeah.
Well, actually, no. If you do a systems view, you don't make a judgment of what's important before you've got evidence. And yet the literature is absolutely full of that sort of cherry-picking approach, which is not helpful.
If you go into these stakeholder workshops, it very much helps to take these full tables, MA, TEEB. Actually, there's a nice table in the MAS first document which translates between the 3, MA, TEEB, and CITES. So you can pick any one and you just move over if you want. But force the people to check every service. Is it being provided by this ecosystem in principle, or does it not work? Isn't like in this part of the Netherlands, erosion not a real big thing. And then the second part is, are people actually using this potential available service or not? And then you can sort of narrow down and say, okay, now these are the ones that are actually used, and then you can prioritize, but still have everything that you've looked at available. Because all of a sudden somebody might come around the corner and say, hey, but I think that's very important. Well, it's been checked.
I think there we have some experience with this desire workshop where we also had long lists of indicators and people had to go through the lists and even create their own at one moment.
Right. Now, Felix Müller is my colleague for the Journal of Ecological Indicators.
Yeah.
He's got bunches of articles on indicators for ecosystem services now too. So do a search on indicators for ecosystem services, different ecosystem services, and you get a lot of suggestions. The MAS working group has a lot of indicators now. Most of them have been selected for being mappable.
Yeah.
Which is nice because then you have geographically explicit type of things. So there's a lot of material you can pick from actually, and here you do, I think it's allowed to do cherry picking in terms of which indicators communicate well, have a reasonable database, reflect the process well, and are useful to get the process that you want on the table. Sometimes you have to sort of move on and say, well, this was nice, but we cannot measure it, or this is nice, like sizes, but we cannot communicate it. So that's an evolutionary thing.
Another thing I do is always have a question that says, have we missed anything?
Yeah.
So I mentioned in India and South Africa I use fire regulation, salinity regulation, arid lands. If you miss them, bad stuff happens. So, you know, it's quite context specific, and there might be some stuff somewhere in Europe that, you know, we haven't thought about.
Okay. You made notes now, couldn't you?
Sorry?
You made your notes now?
Yeah.
Well, they're not gone after this meeting, of course. So they can be contacted afterwards.